Hello and most welcome to 1591 of the Heidegger series, in which they continue where we left off in 1587, Wittgenstein, Rethinking the Inner by Paul Johnston. And we've been talking about the vast complexity of the inner, how it is much more complicated than the difference or the division between inner and outer leads us to understand. How the myriad of complexities dwells within what is both outer and inner and in between. He compares earlier on knowing that it is different from what we usually call experiencing. Knowing is not interrupted by unconsciousness or sleep. Knowing doesn't have a duration as perception most often have. To mark these differences, Wittgenstein suggests that one might call seeing, hearing, etc. states of consciousness, and knowing, believing, intending, etc. dispositions. The general difference between the two is that one does not need to do a spot check to determine whether the former are continuing. Indeed, if one needed to do a spot check, this itself would show that the state had been interrupted. Now I continue where I left off. It is the third paragraph of 138. Seeing, hearing, tasting, etc. are not the only components of the inner which have genuine duration, and hence it is not surprising that there are other concepts where the notion of content is naturally at home. If what we perceive belongs to the content of experience, so too does what we imagine, and also what we lead. In general, therefore, one might define the content of experience as what changes, what goes in space and time. If one talks to oneself, then it would be the imagined sounds and perhaps the feeling in the larynx or something like that. However, once it is applied more generally, the notion of a content itself becomes fragmented. Assuming a slightly different meaning in the different cases. In the case of vision, one could describe the experience contents as what can be produced in a picture in its subjective meaning, when its purport is "this I see." Whatever the object may be that produces the impression. Similarly, a picture can be used to show what the individual is imagining. But what about the other types of sense impression? With hearing, there is a possibility of representation. though not a visual one. But with taste, touch and smell, even this is impossible. In these cases, the only way the individual can describe the content of her experience is through language, through a verbal account of the succeeding experiences. In this respect, the latter senses are similar to sensations and feelings. For here too, the only means of access to the content of the experience is via language. What brings all the groups together, however, is the common feature of genuine duration. The key grammatical similarity is that in each case the individual can give a second-by-second account specifying the content of her experience. Wittgenstein labels psychological concepts which involve genuine duration concepts of undergoings, Erfahrungen, and he treats them as a subset of the wider category, concepts of experience. As we have seen, both images and impressions are undergoings, as are sensations or feelings. But what about emotions, such as sadness? Joy, grief, and delight. The temptation here is to argue that these too must be undergoings if they are real. Surely, one wants to say grief is something one feels and experience, one undergoes. However, to place it in the same category as sense impressions and sensations would be misleading. One reason for this is that while sensations are primarily expressed through utterances, that is the individual's account of what she is feeling, the emotions are characterized by particular ways of acting. There are, for example, joyful, sad and angry ways of behaving. What each of these concepts does is to pick out a particular pattern in human life, and for this reason it characterizes the individual state in a wider sense than the attribution of a particular sensation or feeling. For example, sadness typically manifests itself over a period of time, not just in a moment. By contrast, there is nothing unusual in momentary sensation. Of course, a particular emotion may bring with it certain sensations, e.g. the queasy feel of fear, but even when this occurs, the sensation is not the emotion. Although the emotion may involve experiences or undergoings, the emotion itself is not an undergoing. To illustrate these points, consider the example of grief or sadness. If we try to treat this as a sensation, the first problem that arises is the question of why. It makes no sense to suggest that someone might have this experience every other minute or for 5 minutes in every hour. With a sensation, there is no reason why its duration should not be brief, or why it should not alternate with sensations of a very quick, different kind. So why not in this case? The concept of sadness, however, involves a wider reference than to what the individual is feeling at a particular moment. Sadness has a reason, a history. It is part of a world of thought and feeling. Furthermore, unlike a sensation, it manifests itself in the way the individual acts, be it in obvious ways such as crying, or in more subtle ways such as taciturnity in place of talkativeness. or indeed talkativeness in place of customary reserve. To make these points is not to deny the existence of experiences which often accompany sadness. Indeed, insofar as emotions are linked with particular ways of acting, these themselves may produce characteristic sensations, e.g. the tension in the neck of the literally downcast individual. In many cases, however, even these experiences only gain their significance from the emotion itself. Consider, for example, the characteristic sad feeling expressed in the words, "It brings a lump to my throat." Why is it we do not get this sensation in context other than those of sadness? Well, what if someone did? The problem here lies in the question of how we judge the sameness. What gives the sensation its particular character is precisely its context. Go to the summary here. So we see differences in duration. We see differences in how we talk about these feelings. And we also see that how we think about these feelings are extremely distinct from the feelings themselves. This is an important feature. Do not see the language games as interlocking or be derivative from each other. They are nothing of the sort. There is no origin here in the perception of how we talk about it. None at all. Absolutely zero. It's extremely pertinent clear point that Wittgenstein makes. And as sadness, such a good example. It wouldn't make any sense whatsoever to say that someone has it every other minute or for 5 minutes in every hour. No. With a sensation there is no reason why its duration should not be brief or why it should not alternate with the sensations of a very different kind. So why not in this case? Sadness has a reason, a history, and in such a case it's different from other feelings. And unlike a sensation, it manifests itself in the way the individual acts. He's slouched, he's put down, he's out of air, there's no energy, there's no gleam, no radiance from him or her. And another interesting quote, it brings a lump to my throat. Why is it we do not get this sensation in context other than those of sadness? Very important. So you see the complexity is enormous and not limited by rules like, well, you can actually call inside, outside, some sort of extremely crude rules, and falling into the trap of this super simplified, if you want, idea of inner outer is always to strand with Charybdis or Scylla, inevitably going into the wrong camp. Once more, Wittgenstein has proven his point in a delightful, sensitive, careful, not evocative in the strong sense, but merely barely nodding in a direction, never the Augustinian ostentative direction, not hard arguments with propositions posted on them. It is free, it is easy, it's delightful, it's almost like art. And I say thank you very much and have a very pleasant night. Bye bye for now.